Okay, so today we are going to talk about Sigmund Freud and how he studied and or understood our personality as a whole. So once again, we are going to do today's lecture based on his approach, study what he believed or understood our personality to be, and how he followed along with that. So let's get started. So we're going to start by going back to what we've already talked about earlier on in the year, but we do need to give this overview again, and that is a look at our mind, our consciousness, our personality, everything about us. So Sigmund Freud broke our consciousness, our being, into three parts: our conscious, our preconscious, and our unconscious. So our conscious mind is the upper layer. We talked about this before. It's the upper layer. It is the part of a part of a person that we can see. It's the part that we are able to interact with. It is the part that we project on a day-to-day basis. The person that you know. And the person that you communicate with, this is part of our conscious personality. Okay. Now, Sigmund Freud believed that this conscious personality was considered a mask. It was not who we truly were. It was something that society deemed okay, and so we projected this mask, this fake personality, in order to fit in the world around us. Now, beneath the conscious, we have what is known as the preconscious. Okay, so it is this space. It is not dark enough. It is this space right here, just underneath the surface. And so Sigmund Freud believed that this is aspects of ourself that we can observe, but it is something that we have to really look close into in order to access, in order to see. Sigmund Freud said that this is a part of us that we're not really we don't really know until we have that deep conversation with someone. I always like to think of we all have that friend that knows a little bit more about us, and they maybe ask those questions. You're like, wait, what? Do I actually do that? And you're like, oh my gosh, I do. And it's something that we can see about ourselves, but we have to look a little bit deeper. And finally, at the bottom, we have what we've already talked about, and that is the unconscious mind. And remember, we broke the unconscious mind into three parts. Okay, so the first part being the fact that the unconscious mind is primal. Okay, it is primal. So it is concerned about getting what it wants. It wants, lots of sex, lots of revenge, beating up your arch nemesis, all of that. Um, so along with it being primal, it is also hidden. It is something that we cannot access, and neither. Ooh, that's terrible. And neither can other people. It is something that we hide away, that our conscious has buried down, so that we cannot access it. Okay, so it's primal, it's hidden, and finally, it is our true self. It is who we truly are. Okay, this is our unconscious mind, and we've already talked about this stuff before. It's got all these wild and crazy fantasies, and all these wild and crazy beliefs and wants and urges. And this was kind of the core of Sigmund Freud's theories. So just make sure that as you're following along with what we talk about, you're keeping track of these different parts of our personality. So now we get to what is known as our psyche. So over here we have um, our what's called our iceberg, to kind of tell us a little bit about um, our our personality. Now this is a part of our psyche. It's just another way of like expressing who we are as people. So we have three different parts. We have the id, we have the ego, and we have the superego. And we develop these things at different periods of our life. And so we're going to go through each one of these individually. So let's start with the id. So the id is the first part of your psyche that develops. Develops basically when you are born, and it is based off of the pleasure principle. And the pleasure principle and what the id is looking for is what we would call instant gratification. Instant gratification. So it wants rewards now. It wants to avoid punishments at all costs. Think of like working out. Oftentimes, working out really stinks. Instant gratification really stinks. But afterwards, you feel good, you're stronger, all of that. The id is not about that. It does not care about the long-term gains of working out. It is only caring about the here and now. So the id is working on this pleasure principle. This is where our true like animalistic wants and desires come from, and it wants to avoid pain at all costs. So I have this really dumb picture here. You've got a baby. Baby's hands are really slow at like putting the food into its mouth. So what is it going to do? It's going to put its face into the food because that is the fastest way that it gets the food. Now, just remember, this is the id is a part of us that we are born with. So it is the first thing when we develop out of the womb. And Freud was just like, well, this is basically the way in which this is what helps us survive. And once again, the id is based on the pleasure principle. Now, technically, your ego is developed second, but we are going to talk about the superego first. So the superego develops around the age of 5. And when we are looking at the superego is our conscience. So if you've ever watched, the Disney movies or whatever, the conscience is the part of ourselves that tells you, what is good and what is bad. I took a cookie. I feel bad now. So the superego is going to motivate you to do nice things, and then it is also going to make you feel guilty if you do something wrong. Um, and so Sigmund Freud believed that around the age of 5, we developed this superego. So anytime you're like really trying or really thinking, oh, I should go help that person, that is your superego kicking in and trying to motivate you to help somebody else. So now you've got your id, you've got your superego. So let's look at the middleman. So the middleman is our ego. So the ego is the part of us that is caught in the middle. This is the part of us that we, again, present to the outside world, and it works based off of what we call the reality principle. And so in reality, we can only do certain things. So let's start with the superego, the one we just learned about. The superego wants you to help people all the time. It wants you to be there for other people and help them out. Well, that's not always something that we can do. The world is not always safe. It is not always a good time to help other people out. So you might be walking to class and see someone drop their books, and your superego is going to be like, "Oh, you should go help them." But then the ego is going to be like, well, I can't be late to such and such class, or I might get in trouble, or I won't have enough time to get stuff done, and I want to be exempt. And literally, I have 2 seconds left before class starts, and they already have like 3 people around them. That's your ego stepping in and being like, wait, whoa, 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 slow down. Yes, it would be nice to help, but this is the what we are living in right now. Our id, on the other hand, might be like, oh, well, that's our arch nemesis. We hate that person, so we should go and like kick them while they're down and laugh at them. And then your ego is just like, no, we shouldn't do that. I mean, yes, they're our arch nemesis, but we shouldn't like try to hurt. There's other people around. We might get in trouble for doing that. So our ego works on, again, the reality principle. We live in this world. We can't do whatever the heck we want. And so while we are doing that, while we are living in this world, we have to be careful, and we got to be smart with the things that we do. Okay, so that is our id, ego, and superego. Okay, so now here's the big one. So this is Sigmund Freud's big time work, and it is what he based the majority of his studies and research on, was the psychosexual stages. Okay, so we're going to talk about some weird stuff, and honestly, I didn't want to, say this in any of the videos, but this is this is one of my favorite lectures, and it's super disappointing that we have to do it this way. But here we go. This is it is what it is. So Sigmund Freud believed that our development. So take a step back and think about all the different developmental psychologists we've talked about. We've talked about Lawrence Kohlberg and moral development. We talked about Piaget and cognitive development. So what we are looking at with psychosexual development is how Sigmund Freud believed we developed as we grew older, and how sex and our mind influenced our development. So it's a combination of these two things. How does sex and how does the brain develop over time? How do these two things interact with one another? Okay, and so we're going to cover through these 5 different stages of psychosexual development. Okay, so let's start with the oral stage. So the oral stage is looking at how. So let me go further back. Sigmund Freud named these different stages depending upon what type of sexual gratification or how a person experienced sexual gratification. So in the oral stage, a child is getting sexual gratification through their mouth. And this is a stage, babies are between 0 to like 1.5 to 2 years of age. We'll just say 2 years of age to keep it easy. So during this time, Sigmund Freud believed that babies were getting sexual gratification from their mouth region. And think about all the things that kids do with their mouth. They breastfeed. When they're out and exploring, what's the first thing that they do when they find an object? They throw it into their mouth. And so Sigmund Freud believed that this was very healthy and that children should go through this process, in a normal manner, should be, find things to put in their mouth, should be breastfed and all of that. And so what Sigmund Freud also kind of stipulated is, okay, so what happens if you don't go through a stage properly? So in all of these different um, all these different stages of psychosexual development, we are going to have what are known as fixations. Okay? So fixations happen when you do not properly go through a stage. So fixation happens when you don't go through a stage. You didn't properly go through the oral stage. Either you weren't breastfed, you were force fed as a child, different ways in which we could improperly go through the stage. And there are tons of different ways in which this like pans out. But basically what's going to happen is, as you can see, is if you don't properly go through this oral stage, you end up having a fixation. That fixation is going to come out when you're an adult. Okay, so these are not problems that you're going to see when the child is like 3 or 4 years old. No, this is going to be when you get older and you're an adult. We'll come back to that point here. So you can see a child that is force fed, deprived of food, or early weaning, which is talking about like they were breastfed, but then they were like taken off of breastfeeding early, or in this case too early. That it causes problems later in life. So when it says oral activities. So have you seen a person that always has to have their hands in and around their mouth or are constantly chewing things? You go to a restaurant and you see their drink straw is like totally mangled and gnarled because they're constantly chewing on them. That's an oral fixation. Um, Mr. Monk, even while he is lecturing, is constantly chewing bubblegum. That's an oral fixation. And so, when I first found out about this, I was just like, oh, that's funny. I'm going to go, razz my mom for not breastfeeding me as a child. I went and did that, and she cried, and I felt terrible because she actually had, weaned me off it early because it hurt her. So I felt like a terrible person, and it was really not a great moment for me. But this is oral fixation, and this comes out with people that get old. Okay, so that is the oral stage, and let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one is known as the anal phase. So once again, we are deriving sexual pleasure from where? Yes, the butt, the anal, from our anus. All right, so that is where we are deriving sexual pleasure. Okay, so the anal stage is generally from like 1.5 years, 2 years to about 3 years of age. I'm just going to keep this simple, 2 to 3. Okay, not super important about the years, but it's during that time. So when you think about what kids are doing during this time, what are they doing? They are learning how to be potty trained. Okay, it's one of the big things during this time of a child's life and a family's life is parents are desperate to stop having the kid change their have to change their diaper all the time, so they're really encouraging the child to um, get out there, use the toilet. I have some friends who have had young kids, and I've been in the house when they're doing potty training, and it's just like the kid, uses a restroom and runs out and like, I went potty, and everyone's like cheering, and I'm just like, you gross, go wash your hands. Um, and so this is all like a big thing, and so Sigmund Freud's like, yep, kids are deriving sexual pleasure from properly pooping. So, what ends up happening? So, once again, just like in the oral phase, we have fixations. So, you can have anal fixations. All right. So, toilet training can sometimes doesn't go so well. You can have toilet training that's too harsh or too lax, where basically the child is not is going through this stage, but maybe they're really nervous about using the restroom too early, and so they're all like tense, and when they try to use the restroom they just sit there because they can't relax, or maybe they're too relaxed and they just poop their pants or whatever beforehand, just because they don't know how to like tighten up. So what Sigmund Freud would say is that this influences a person's obsessiveness, a person's tidiness, or untidiness. You'll have people. I'm sure we've all walked into someone's room and it been like, "Oh my gosh! Like, where's the floor? Like, how do you live in this huge mess?" And Sigmund Freud would be like, "Well, the reason why is that during their childhood they were too lax, and so now they've become like super untidy." Or you have instances where the person is like um, super like uptight all the time. Like anytime something happens, they're all just like super tense. And Sigmund Freud would be like, oh well, how was their childhood, or how was their um, potty training stage. Were they able to poop normally? And usually that would be the connection there. Okay, so that is the anal phase. All right, so let's move on to the next phase. The next phase is known as the phallic stage. And phallic, for those of you who are in an English class, phallic means what? Very good. Phallic means penis. Okay, very good. So this is technically what is known as the penis stage. Okay, and so I'm sure some of you are already shouting, "Hold on, I don't have a penis. We can't be going through this stage." And I'm like, "Yes, I got you. No worries." So Sigmund Freud believed that while boys went through this phallic stage normally, we'll get to what's going on in the phallic stage here in a second. Girls go through what is known as penis envy. Okay, so during this time, they realize that they don't have a penis and they become envious of this and, develop penis envy. So, yes, Sigmund Freud believed that you have penis envy during this time. Okay, so there you go. Don't worry, we'll get to the boys here. So, this is the phallic stage. So I'm sure that many of you are already connecting dots. Hopefully, your English teachers have taught you about what's going to come next. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is Oedipus. All right, Oedipus. Oedipus. Okay, so this is the phallic stage is also known as the Oedipus complex phase. So basically, during this time, Sigmund Freud believed that young boys fell in love with their mother, and not only fell in love with their mother, but wanted to have sex with their mother. That red's not really showing up. But during this phase, that little boys fell in love with their mother and wanted to have sex with them. But unfortunately, during this time, the child is unable to have sex with their mother. Um, Mostly because their mom's not interested, but they don't really know that. But also, they become afraid that the father is going to get in the way and find out and get mad. And the boys, are worried that if the father finds out, that he is going to cut off their penis or circumcise them. So, according to Freud, little boys are worried that their dads will find out that they want to have sex with their moms and either cut off or circumcise their penises. Okay, so obvious, obvious, normal things. All right. So, in order to get around this, the little boys, decide that if you can't beat them, you got to join them. So, little boys are going to start to act like their dad, to dress like their dad, in order to try to woo their mom into sleeping with them. So, there you go. There's the Oedipus complex. You boys can have some awkward conversations with your parents from now on, and hopefully this picture just got a lot creepier for you. So, yep, that's the Oedipus complex. All right, so now let's take a step back. We'll talk about Karen Horneye later. So there you go. That's the Oedipus complex. Cool. Penis envy, all that. There you go. You're welcome. Oh, yeah, let's talk about, real quick, let's talk about fixation. So basically, the phallic stage became Sigmund Freud's, like, oh, if I haven't already covered it, it just kind of like fell into this stage. So any sort of like abnormal, strict, like as it says, family setup, one parent leaving the family, divorced parents, having, you know, I don't know, whatever kind of outside the quote unquote nuclear or normal family could cause um, any number of these issues over here. Okay, you will not be expected to know all of this. You'll just need to be for this stage. You need to more need to understand like the Oedipus complex and what does the phallic stage mean and what's the relationship between the boy and the mom. So okay, so next we have the latent stage. This is where it gets a little less interesting. Simply put, the latent stage is discussing um, the stage in which boys and girls kind of fall off, where there is no specific region of their body where they are sexually driven. So this is kind of the elementary age. This is like anywhere between like 6 to 9 years of age, where the children, where their sexual drive, the sexual libido, disappears, and they're focused solely on making friends and hanging out. So during this time, you'll often see that children spend time with uh, the same sex. So little boys play with little boys, and little girls play with little girls. They don't often um, intermingle because there's really no sexual drive, according to Sigmund Freud. Okay, and finally we get to the genital stage. This is the stage in which you are in now. It happens from puberty onwards, and basically what's going to happen is all those fixations that we talked about in the first three stages. This is when you deal with those fixations. Okay, so people with that are really messy, this is where they deal with their anal fixation or their oral fixation or their phallic fixation. Um, and yeah, so that's really all you need to know. It's the final stage. There's no specific thing. Oh, you're seeking sexual pleasure through your genitals. For boys, that's their penis. Girls, it's their vagina, and it's all normal, all gravy. Okay. That is it for Sigmund Freud and the psychosexual stages. Good luck. Have some fun conversations with your parents.